Hey, you don't belong here. Step back from the door. Now.
I'm here on federal business. You're obstructing me. Move.
Federal? Yeah, right. You look suspicious as hell. Last warning.
My name is Marcus Thorne, Department of Justice. Touch me, and this becomes a federal case.
One bright Tuesday afternoon around 12:15 p.m., a luxury sedan pulled up to the curb and a man stepped out. That man was Marcus Thorne, a 54-year-old federal compliance director for the Department of Justice, a man whose signature alone could authorize federal audits of entire police departments. What Vance did next, physically blocking Thorne from entering, mocking his appearance, and calling the police on a high-ranking federal official, would become a definitive case study in how unchecked bias creates financial and social ruin. Before we get into the details of this catastrophe, tell me, where are you tuning in from today? If you appreciate stories that expose the truth behind the headlines, go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Your support is the fuel that keeps this channel running. The Sterling Roast isn't your average corner coffee shop. Located in the heart of Chicago's financial district, it sits on the ground floor of a historic limestone building catering to the city's elite. We're talking about a place with marble floors, velvet ropes, and a doorman, or in this case, a security guard stationed at the entrance to manage the flow of bankers, politicians, and high-powered attorneys. It was the lunch rush, and the sun was reflecting off the skyscrapers, casting long, sharp shadows across the pavement. The air was crisp. Inside, deals were being made over $20 espressos. Marcus Thorne had arrived for a scheduled 12:30 p.m. compliance meeting with the building's ownership group regarding accessibility laws. He wasn't there for the coffee. He was there to ensure the law was being followed. Marcus Thorne was a man who commanded respect without saying a word. Standing 6'2", with graying temples and an immaculate custom-tailored navy suit, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had spent 30 years in federal service. He had started his career as a civil rights attorney in the 90s, fighting housing discrimination in the Deep South. He moved to the DOJ in the early 2000s, where he spearheaded task forces that dismantled systemic corruption in municipal governments. He was currently the director of the Federal Compliance Division, overseeing the enforcement of Title II of the Civil Rights Act. His colleagues described him as a man of ironclad integrity, a legal scholar who knew the Constitution better than most people know their own children. He was patient, he was fair, but he was not a man to be trifled with. On this particular Tuesday, he was reviewing his notes on a tablet as he approached the heavy brass doors of the Sterling Roast. He looked exactly like what he was, a powerful man about to handle business. But to Tyler, Vance, Marcus Thorne was simply a threat. Vance stood by the door, his arms crossed over his chest, his security uniform tight across his shoulders, a visual overcompensation for the authority he lacked. Vance had developed a reputation among the staff. He was the guy who took his job too seriously, the guy who would harass delivery drivers for parking 2 inches over the line, the guy who stared a little too long at customers who didn't look like the typical clientele. The typical clientele at the Sterling Roast was overwhelmingly white and wealthy. Vance viewed himself as the guardian of this exclusivity. When he saw Marcus Thorne approaching, he didn't see the tailored suit or the expensive leather briefcase. He saw a black man walking with purpose toward his door. In Vance's warped worldview, a black man moving with confidence was inherently suspicious. He clocked Thorne from 30 feet away. He narrowed his eyes. He decided right then and there that this man wasn't getting in. Vance stepped directly into the center of the doorway, blocking the path. He didn't offer a greeting. He didn't smile. He simply spread his feet apart in a tactical stance he'd seen in movies, placed a hand on his belt, where he carried pepper spray and a baton, and waited. Thorne paused, looked up from his tablet, and offered a polite nod. "Good afternoon." Thorne set his voice a deep baritone, expecting Vance to step aside. Vance didn't move. "We're at capacity," Vance lied. The lie was clumsy. Through the glass doors, Thorne could clearly see empty tables. He could see people ordering at the counter with no line. More importantly, as they stood there, a group of 3 white businessmen in casual polos walked right past Vance, who stepped aside to let them in, offering them a respectful nod before stepping back to block Thorne. Thorne watched the doors swing shut behind the group. He adjusted his glasses, his expression remaining calm, but his eyes sharpening. "Excuse me," Thorne said, keeping his tone level. "I just watched 3 men enter. There are empty tables visible from here. I have a meeting with the building management in 10 minutes. Vance smirked. It was a look of pure arrogance, the look of a man who believes he holds all the cards. "Those were VIPs, Vance scoffed. "Private club members. You don't look like a member. We have a dress code and we have a guest list. If you aren't on it, you don't get in. Step back from the door." Thorne looked down at his own attire, a 3-piece suit that cost more than Vance made in 2 months, and then back at the guard. This wasn't about a dress code. Thorne had litigated enough discrimination cases to know exactly what this was. He decided to give the young man an off-ramp, a chance to correct his mistake before it became fatal. "Young man," Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming authoritative. "My name is Director Marcus Thorne. I am a federal official with the Department of Justice. I am here on official business. I am asking you to step aside and let me proceed to my meeting." Vance laughed. It was a harsh barking sound. "Director, yeah, right. And I'm the mayor of Chicago. Listen, buddy, I don't care who you say you are. You're aggressive, you're loitering, and you're making a scene. You need to leave the property immediately or I will remove you." The irony was thick enough to cut with a knife. Thorne hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't moved forward. He was standing still, hands visible, speaking calmly. Vance was the one escalating, his face flushing red, his voice rising for the benefit of the onlookers starting to glance out the windows. This is the moment where bias turns into liability. Do you think security guards should be personally liable for civil rights violations? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thorne sighed a long, weary exhalation. He reached into his inner jacket pocket. "I am going to show you my credentials," Thorne stated, clearly telegraphing his movements so there could be no mistake. He pulled out a leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it up. The gold shield of the Department of Justice caught the sunlight. Next to it was his federal ID card, complete with a holographic seal and his rank Federal Compliance Director. "This is a federal badge. You are obstructing a federal official. Read the name. Read the title." Vance didn't even look. He glanced at the leather case and sneered. "I can buy a badge like that online for $15, Vance spat. "You think I'm stupid? That's fake. You're impersonating an officer. That's a felony." Vance reached for his radio, his eyes never leaving Thorne's face. "Control, this is Vance. I have a hostile individual at the main entrance. Attempted breach. Subject is refusing to leave and flashing fake law enforcement credentials. Send backup and call PD. Immediate assistance required." "You are making a grave mistake," Thorne said, closing the badge but keeping it in his hand. "You are calling the police to report a crime that is not happening. I suggest you call your manager instead." "Back up!" Vance shouted, putting a hand on his pepper spray. "Back away from the door. You're trespassing." By now, a small crowd had gathered on the sidewalk. People were stopping to watch. Phones were coming out. A woman in a business suit paused, looking concerned. "He's just standing there," she muttered to her companion. Vance heard her but ignored it. He was in the zone now, fueled by adrenaline and prejudice. He saw a large black man and his brain screamed danger, overriding all logic, all evidence, and all decency. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Thorne remained rooted to the spot. He knew the drill. If he left, he looked guilty. If he fought, he ended up hurt. He had to stand his ground legally and physically with absolute passive resistance. He began to mentally catalog every detail, the guard's name tag, the time, the specific words used, the number of witnesses. He was building his case in real time. A patrol car screeched to a halt at the curb. Officer Garrett, a 35-year-old patrolman with the Chicago PD, stepped out. Garrett had been on the force for 10 years. He was tired, he was cynical, and he knew Tyler Vance. They grabbed beers occasionally at a local sports bar. He knew Vance was a bit intense, but he considered him one of the good guys. Garrett walked up, hand resting on his holster, assessing the scene. He saw Vance agitated and pointing. He saw Thorne, a large black man, standing firm. His bias kicked in before his boots hit the sidewalk. "What's the problem here, Tyler?" Garrett asked, turning his back to Thorne to address the security guard. This is a classic tactical error and a sign of bias, ignoring the subject to confer with the accuser. "This guy is trying to force his way in," Vance said, breathless with excitement. "I told him it's a private event. He refused to leave. Then he flashed some fake badge and claimed he's with the DOJ. He's aggressive, Garrett. He threatened me." Garrett turned slowly to face Thorne. He looked him up and down. He didn't see the suit. He didn't see the calm demeanor. He saw a suspect. "All right, sir." Garrett set his voice hard. "You need to step away from the building. Let's see some ID." Thorne held up the federal credentials again. "Officer, I am Director Marcus Thorne, Department of Justice. I am here for a scheduled meeting. This guard is obstructing federal business and has filed a false report." Garrett glanced at the badge, then looked at Thorne's face. The cognitive dissonance was powerful. A black man looking like this holding a badge like that. It didn't compute. "I've seen plenty of fake badges," Garrett said dismissively. "Put that away. I want to see a driver's license. And turn around. I need to pat you down for weapons. The guard said you were aggressive." "I will not turn around." Thorne said, his voice like granite. "I do not consent to a search. I have committed no crime. I have provided my federal identification. You are required to verify it. You can call the DOJ field office. You can call your sergeant. But you will not touch me." Garrett's face tightened. His authority was being challenged in front of an audience. "Sir, I'm not asking. I'm telling. You are trespassing. Failure to comply is resisting arrest. Turn around now." "I am on public property," Thorne corrected him. "And I am a federal agent. If you place your hands on me without cause, you are violating Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code. Deprivation of rights under color of law. Last warning," Garrett barked, stepping into Thorne's personal space. Thorne didn't flinch. "Call your supervisor, officer. Do it now." Garrett made his choice. He reached out, grabbed Thorne's wrist, and spun him around. Thorne, true to his training and his philosophy, did not fight back. He allowed himself to be turned, but he kept his head high. "I am complying under duress," Thorne announced loudly to the crowd. "I am being arrested falsely. Everyone, please record this." Garrett kicked Thorne's legs apart. "Stop resisting," Garrett said automatically, even though Thorne was standing perfectly still. Vance watched with a smug grin, feeling vindicated. "Yeah, cuff him," Vance jeered. "Take him downtown." The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was sickeningly loud in the quiet street. Click, click, click. Garrett tightened them unnecessarily. Thorne winced, but remained silent. He felt the cold steel against his wrists, a sensation he had fought for decades to protect others from. Now, here he was, a director of the Department of Justice, shackled like a common criminal on a Chicago sidewalk because a security guard and a cop couldn't see past the color of his skin. Garrett marched Thorne toward the patrol car. "You're under arrest for trespassing, disorderly conduct, and impersonating a peace officer," Garrett recited. He shoved Thorne against the side of the car. Thorne's face was pressed against the cold glass. Inside the cafe, the patrons were watching. The VIPs Vance had let in were filming with their iPhones, laughing. "Check my pocket," Thorne said calmly, his cheek against the car. "My phone. Call the number labeled Priority Desk, or call the captain of the 1st District. His name is Captain O'Malley. We play golf on Sundays." Garrett paused. The name drop was specific. O'Malley was the precinct commander. Garrett hesitated, a flicker of doubt finally entering his mind. "You know O'Malley." "Call him," Thorne said. "Tell him you just arrested Marcus Thorne. See what he says." Garrett looked at Vance, who was still grinning. Then he looked at the crowd. Then he looked at the prisoner. Something in Thorne's voice, the absolute lack of fear, finally broke through the officer's ego. Garrett pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, can you run a name for me? Marcus Thorne, Thorne. There was a long pause. The static of the radio was the only sound on the street. Then the dispatcher's voice came back urgent and loud. "Unit 4 Alpha is the subject in custody." "Affirmative," Garrett said. "Unit 4 Alpha, unhand the subject immediately. Supervisor is en route. That is a code red federal flag. Subject is a level 1 federal director. Repeat, unhand the subject immediately." The color drained from Officer Garrett's face so fast it looked like he might faint. He looked at the radio, then at Thorne. His hands started to shake. He fumbled for his keys. I... Vance's smirk vanished. He took a step back. What did they say?" Garrett ignored him. He unlocked the cuffs with trembling fingers. As soon as the metal clicked open, Thorne stepped back, rubbing his wrists. He turned to face Garrett. The look in his eyes was terrifying. It wasn't anger. It was judgment. "You didn't verify," Thorne said quietly. "You took the word of a biased witness, you ignored a federal credential, and you put hands on a senior DOJ official. You have just ended your career, officer." A black SUV tore around the corner, lights flashing. Then another. Then a third. It wasn't just the patrol supervisor. It was the FBI. The DOJ field office had been alerted the moment Thorne's name was run through the NCIC database with an arrest tag. Men in suits poured out of the vehicles. Captain O'Malley was in the second car. He jumped out, his face purple with rage, running toward Garrett. "What did you do?" O'Malley screamed at Garrett. "What the hell did you do?" Garrett was speechless. He pointed weakly at Vance. He told me." Thorne adjusted his cuffs and straightened his tie. He walked over to Captain O'Malley. "Captain, good to see you. I wish it were under better circumstances." "Director Thorne," O'Malley stammered. I cannot apologize enough. Are you injured? Do you need a medic?" "I have bruising on my wrists," Thorne said clinically, "and my civil rights have been violated. I want that officer's badge number, and I want that security guard detained for filing a false police report." Vance tried to sneak back into the cafe. 2 FBI agents blocked his path. "Going somewhere?" one asked. Vance looked around, panic setting in. "I was just doing my job." He looked suspicious. He didn't belong here. "That," Thorne said, walking over to Vance, "is exactly the problem. You decided I didn't belong, and you used the police as a weapon to enforce your prejudice. You are going to learn today that the law applies to everyone, even the gatekeepers." The fallout was immediate and nuclear. The video of the arrest hit social media before Thorne had even left the scene. Justice Director, arrested, trended worldwide within an hour. The image of a distinguished black man in a 3-piece suit being handcuffed while a smirking guard watched became the iconic image of the year. The lawsuit filed by Marcus Thorne was not about money for him. He didn't need it. It was about sending a message that would shake the industry. The suit named the security firm the Sterling Roast, Tyler Vance, Officer Garrett, and the city of Chicago. The charges were extensive: false imprisonment, defamation, assault, battery, civil rights violations, and malicious prosecution. The security firm, trying to save face, fired Vance immediately, but they couldn't fire the liability. Discovery revealed that Vance had 3 prior complaints of racial profiling that the company had ignored. They had kept him on the payroll knowing he was a risk. That negligence cost them. They settled for $6.8 million to avoid a public trial that would have destroyed their remaining contracts. The Sterling roast was boycotted. Protesters stood outside for months. They eventually closed that location and rebranded. Officer Garrett was suspended, investigated, and ultimately fired. He lost his pension. He lost his standing. He became a pariah in the department, the guy who didn't check the badge. Tyler Vance faced criminal charges for filing a false report and was sued personally. He declared bankruptcy. He is now barred from holding a security license in the state of Illinois. The last reports say he works in a warehouse loading boxes where he has no authority over anyone. Marcus Thorne donated the entire settlement amount to a legal defense fund for victims of racial profiling who don't have a badge to save them. He continued his work at the DOJ, but with a new mission. He drafted the Thorne Protocol, a mandatory training module now used by federal and local law enforcement agencies across the country. It requires mandatory verification of credentials before any physical detainment of an individual claiming government status, and strict penalties for officers who rely solely on third-party hearsay in bias-prone situations. The story of Marcus Thorne is a victory, yes, but it is a haunting one. Because we have to ask ourselves, what if he hadn't been a director? What if he had been a teacher or an accountant or a student? What if he didn't have Captain O'Malley on speed dial? The handcuffs would have stayed on. The charges might have stuck. The record would have been ruined. Marcus Thorne was saved by his power, but he was targeted for his skin. And that is the reality we are still fighting. The system worked for him only because he was the one designed to oversee the system. For everyone else, the Tyler Vances of the world are still at the door blocking the way. Justice was served in Chicago, but the battle continues. We have to demand that businesses train their staff to see people, not profiles. We have to demand that police investigate, not escalate. And we have to keep sharing these stories until the day comes when a man can walk into a coffee shop without needing a federal badge to prove he has the right to be there. This incident wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice. A choice made by a guard to hate, and a choice made by a cop to follow blindly. We need to make better choices. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, if it made you think, please leave a comment below. Justice for Thorne, or just your thoughts on how we can fix this broken dynamic. And don't forget to like and subscribe. We will keep bringing you the truth one story at a time. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and look out for one another.